On this holiest day of the year, Judaism calls us to become better people and guides us on how to answer the call. One of Judaism's most profound insights can be found in a Hebrew word we say many times on Yom Kippur, chet. Chet is often translated poorly as sin. Yet the word chet carries deep ethical and spiritual meanings that are strikingly different from the connotation of the word sin in English. The profound nuances of the word chet take center stage in Bereshit, Genesis, the story of the creation of humanity and the Jewish people, suggesting that the wisdom of the word chet is fundamental to what it means to be human. Let's start with the word chet itself. It comes from a Hebrew root, chet, tet, aleph, that means to miss the mark, the way a marksman with a bow and arrow or a slingshot might miss or hit the mark. We see this root used literally in the Tanakh, the full Hebrew Bible, including the prophets and the writings. For example, the book of Judges tells us that among the 12 tribes of the children of Israel, the tribe of Benjamin had an elite corps of left-handed slingshotters who could sling a stone and a hair and not miss. Lo yachati. You can hear the shared root in this verb, to miss, yachati, and the noun, chet. So chet, the word often translated as sin, literally means a missing of the mark, the act of mark missing. It is a metaphor embedded in a word, as when we say in English that someone sparked a new trend, or that a politician put a freeze on a policy. Although I would not recommend saying someone sparked a freeze, because that makes no sense. I'm not a physicist, others in the room actually are, but I don't think you can spark a freeze. By the way, is everyone hearing me well? There's no feedback or anything. Good, it's important to me. So how is missing the mark different from sin? Robert Alter of UC Berkeley, in his landmark, The Hebrew Bible, a translation with commentary, offers this answer. The fraught theological connotations of the English term sin are not quite right. Chet is connotatively different from sinning, with the associations of that English term with spiritual degradation leading to self-flagellation. The idea of missing the mark does not mean that one deserves degradation or self-flagellation. Every marksman misses the mark sometimes, and no one is born having innately missed the mark. Rather, we are all beings of inherent dignity and infinite worth, created in the image of God. If a marksman misses, they simply want to work harder to hit the mark next time. In this way, the idea of missing the mark still entails accountability, because it matters to aim right, and it matters to hit the mark. Yet missing the mark does not warrant harsh judgmentalism or humiliation. The wisdom of the word chet, mark missing, is to combine our responsibilities to each other with awareness of our fallibility, understanding, compassion, and love for ourselves and each other, and ultimately, a deep sense of our common humanity. Early in the stories of Bereshit, Genesis, the word chet shines a powerful illuminating light. Adam and Eve are raising their children, Cain and Abel, the first family. Each child learns a profession. Abel becomes a shepherd, Cain a farmer. In time, they each offer sacrifices to God. Abel gives his finest sheep, the firstlings of his flock, the choicest ones, the text says. Cain only gives some average produce. God values Abel's sacrifice and not Cain's. In response, the text says, Cain seethed greatly and his face fell. God poetically calls out to Cain and specifically refers to chet, the act of mark missing. The Hebrew word takes a different form here as chatat, but the root meaning is the same. Here's my translation of God's 8-line poem to Cain. Why are you seething, and why is your face fallen? If you do good, shall it not be lifted up? And if you do not do good, at the door, mark missing, chatat, is crouching. And its craving is toward you, but you shall rule over it. This poem is in the eternal canon of poems that encapsulate the human condition, along with Shakespeare's To Be or Not to Be soliloquy, Emily Dickinson's Hope is the Thing with Feathers, and Langston Hughes's I Too. With its concision and even rhythm and flow, the poem has a gem-like sound that evokes a sense of pure wisdom. Let's unpack phrase by phrase what the divine voice, according to what that means for each of us, is saying to Cain and to all of us about missing the mark and how we can strive toward our best selves. In the poem's first 2 lines, God exposes the fundamental flaw in Cain's actions. He did not try to do the best he could. The text says, and Cain seethed greatly, and his face fell. And God repeats back to him almost satirically, why are you seething? And why is your face fallen? I might loosely translate God's lines as, what are you so mad about, Cain? Come on, you knew you weren't doing your best. Why do you feel you have the right to be mad when it didn't work out? Or, as my sister, a fiction writer, likes to say, well, if it isn't the consequences of my own actions. Cain was just going through the motions. He did not even try to hit the mark, so of course he missed it. The Torah helps us to identify and even laugh about Cain's mistake, and by implication, to acknowledge when we too are acting like Cain. The story shows us that we are not alone. Across the millennia, we are all in this together, figuring out this business of missing and hitting the mark. And just as it is possible to miss the mark, it is possible to hit the mark with the next shot we take. This brings us to the poem's next 4 lines. If you do good, shall it not be lifted up? And if you do not do good, at the door, mark missing, chatat, is crouching. We each have the power to do good or not to do good. That is the question for Bereshit. If we do good, our deed is lifted up. We make a positive difference. Our good deed lifts up beyond ourselves and extends out to others, and it lifts up who we are. At the same time, the poem says, chatat, mark missing, or choices that are not good, is crouching at the door. It is a bit of a mixed metaphor to say that mark missing is crouching, but it is a sacred and wise mixed metaphor with a great deal to show us. The verb for crouching, rovetz, is frequently used in the Tanakh to describe animals. For example, a crouching lion. The verb evokes, again, not shame, but care and vigilance. Here in Bloomington, there are animals that we would not want coming in the door. Perhaps not lions, but say foxes or deer. And so we are careful to close our doors. We should use the same carefulness in how we treat others. Just as we pause to close and lock the door when leaving the house, we should pause before we speak or act and make sure we are aiming to be good to each other. Ibn Ezra, the venerable Jewish Bible commentator of the golden age of Muslim Spain, brings this figurative interpretation of what it means to watch our doors. It means to watch the doors of our mouths. At this moment in the story, when the text has already said that Cain is seething, God's call of care and vigilance is highly timely. The great current-day Rabbi Tamara Khan Eskenazi of Los Angeles, in the Torah, a women's commentary, writes, God warns Cain about the danger of succumbing to rage. In the terms of modern mindfulness, God is urging Cain to avoid reactivity, simply reacting out of instinct, habit, or our less lofty inclinations. With these choices before Cain and this call of moral carefulness, we arrive at the climactic, decisive final line of God's poem. At the door, mark missing, chatat, is crouching, and its craving is toward you, but you, Tim Sholbo, you shall rule over it. Why does God say to Cain, you shall rule, or you will rule, Tim Shol, in the future tense, technically the imperfect tense, as confidently as if saying, the sun shall rise in the morning? God is not playing a literal fortune teller. We know what happens next in the story is not that Cain apologizes for missing the mark and resolves to do better. The opposite happens. Cain murders Abel. Cain not only does not hit the mark, he willfully aims in the complete opposite direction. So why does God say to Cain, you shall rule? Sometimes to understand something, it is helpful to compare it to what it is not and see what makes it distinctive. In John Steinbeck's 1952 magnum opus, East of Eden, Steinbeck renders this Hebrew word as thou mayest, or you may, which is close, but not the same as the Hebrew you will rule, or you shall rule, Tim Shol. Steinbeck's characters even use the original Hebrew word, though this too he does not get quite right, rendering Tim Shol as Tim shall. I would love to know how John Steinbeck learned enough Hebrew to get the word almost right, but not enough to get it truly correct. If Steinbeck were alive and here with us, I would be honored beyond words for him to give a reading at Beth Shalom, and I would also invite him to join our Hebrew classes taught by Rabbi Ron Klotz. Steinbeck certainly understood the profound truth of the Cain and Abel story that each of us may indeed choose to do good or not do good, and the choice is up to us. And yet the biblical writer did not choose to end the poem with you may. Why not? What is the biblical writer showing us by ending the poem in the future tense, you shall rule over it? When I think about what the future tense can mean, I can't help but think of my high school cross-country coaches. I invite you each to call to mind a coach in your life, a dance instructor, a thesis advisor, a therapist, any coach in the broadest sense. In pep talks before a race, my cross-country coaches would use the future tense. All right, boys, we're going to run a strong race. We're going to push each other. We're going to deliver out there. My coaches spoke in the future tense, not because they were fortune tellers. Sometimes we did not, in fact, run a strong race. My coaches spoke in the future tense because they were calling on us to run a strong race, as if doing so were the only option, conveying our responsibility to answer the call. And with the future tense, they also imparted deep encouragement and care for us, because they believed so much that we could answer the call, that it already seemed a certainty that we would. This is what Steinbeck's thou mayest is missing. Like our coaches, God speaks to Cain and describes making the right choice in the future tense as if it is the only option, both because God sets high standards for Cain and because God is rooting for Cain with love, as if it is already a certainty that Cain will answer the call. In sum, God is coaching Cain and giving him ethical spiritual target practice. Rashi, the celebrated rabbi of 11th century France and founder of the golden age of Jewish Bible commentary, interprets Tim Shol, you will rule over it, as God saying to Cain, if you will it, you will triumph over it. In the words Rashi envisions, God almost sounds like a coach today. So too, the divine presence, the divine voice, according to how we each interpret this, calls out to us, cares about us, and is rooting for us and believes that we will answer the call. In Rabbi Rami Shapiro's words that we will say in the morning, we are loved by an unending love. I might add that we are called by an unending call to choose rightly. This divine love and this divine call are one, twinning high standards with support and love for us and striving to meet them. This dual sense that God is both summoning us and encouraging us is also what we mean when we call God Avinu Malkeinu, our parent, our sovereign, with both a parent's love and a sovereign's high expectations. The ancient rabbis, if they lived in our time, might well have titled this prayer, Our Coach. And every year on Yom Kippur, we all come together for an entire day of ethical, spiritual target practice. We set aside all the distractions of the world, even food, to focus on one goal: how we can best hit the mark in how we treat each other. As we enter Yom Kippur, this Kol Nidrei, I invite each of us to look back through this past year. Our choices, words, actions, the moments of all our relationships, family, friends, co-workers, Uber drivers, grocery store clerks. And I invite each of us to watch these moments as if we were watching them on video in the presence of our coach, the presence of unending love and unending call to choose right that fills this world. Some moments we watch and feel glad or proud or moved. Other moments we watch and wince, feel regret, or simply feel, I know I could have hit that mark and I missed it. The divine coach does not speak literalistically in a voice booming from the skies, but as we know from the human coaches of our lives, if you are watching footage of your past performance in the presence of the coach does not have to say anything. We know what we could have done better. Just being in the presence of the coach makes us say, I will aim better in my shots this year. I will put all my minds and heart into how to aim better. I will hit the mark. Now envision the film reel of the year to come. How do we want to treat people? What marks do we want to hit? What kind of year of 5785 do we want to look back on next year at this time in the presence of our coach, in the presence of the divine? These good acts yet to come are ours for the doing. The divine voice calls us to do them, and the divine voice calls out that we will. Gamar Chatima Tova, may you be sealed well in the book of life.